They're gonna kill the love of my life.
Casey!
If I don't go back to what I was doing.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide, now playing. Rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13.
Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning and welcome to the new year. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt of Venus Unplugged, the place where we discuss and explore all things Venusian, from Aphrodite to Eros to the principles of love in our lives, and basically trying to understand the enormity and the pathology of the feminine, both in men and women. So I did not do the show last week because I was at a fabulous, but I mean fabulous, costume ball. I dressed as the 16th century courtesan Veronica Franco, and it was glorious. There were some pictures taken. As a matter of fact, there were a lot of international people, and so a lot of people took pictures. And somebody will send one, and I'll put it up on Facebook. So that's what I did. And also, I want you to know that the first new moon of a new year, which I believe is January 20th this year, extremely important. It's a very prophetic moon. It usually has to do with the beloved, both within and without. It's kind of like in ancient times, it would give us an image or foretell, if one was a maiden, as it was called, of who was coming into your life. But it is also versions of, I think, the positive animus. So it is a time about relatedness. We can call in the proper relationships and blow off the ones who have, we don't serve one another's vital outcome, which is interesting. It's something I would realize that, we can have friends for like a long time, and then suddenly it's like just not there anymore. So sometimes we have to have fights or make shit up in our heads or whatever happens. We create a drama around it. And by drama, I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean that as a sacred play where it's a teaching play. But the truth is, it's as if we've grown or we have shifted the focus. So we may move from, let's say, an Amazonian woman. Remember that when we were talking about the eternal feminine, and she's the one who's powerful in the world and wants to change the culture, okay? Women can grow from being a mother, and that's the predominant archetype that their psyche is ruled by or experiencing. And all of a sudden she's like, I ain't doing this mother stuff anymore. You're all grown up now. And we want to go out in the world, or we want to change the world, or we want to climb a mountain. Then suddenly the people, the reality that we have built around living out one of the aspects of the eternal feminine, it doesn't work anymore. You need to change that. So that's, I think, if we understood that more. It's once again, because we're talking about the mysteries of Pompeii, which probably will last another week or two. This is one of the phases. This is one of the great mysteries in our lives, in men too. Where suddenly, if they're growing, suddenly it's like, that doesn't work anymore. Okay, that needs to be changed. because somebody's doing something in the building. That noise, either that or God is getting ready to drill into my life. Okay, so then we spoke about the new moon, very, very, very powerful. So take advantage of that energy. It's kind of like Black Friday for the holy. All sorts of insights, and we can collect and know and understand. And also in terms of resolutions, resolutions for me personally, it's a lie. I'm not going to do that shit. If I didn't do it last year, I'm not doing it this year. I don't know what in God's name would get me to lie to myself, or anybody else for that matter. But what I can do, and what I do, is I ask several questions of myself, and then try to live into the answers. That I know I can do. That's part of my nature. So it's like I don't know if you've ever read Rilke's book on the young poet, Letters to a Young Poet, where he tells the young poet to ask the questions and learn to live into the answers. It's kind of like that. It's not kind of, it is that. Where I can begin to understand, for instance, what is it in my nature that gets in my own way? Then as I watch my dreams or the living dream, the living dream we call reality, I look at that. But it's kind of something, it's a musing, it's a directed musing, where I know that's going to keep on coming up, and I'm going to keep on looking at that. And until I understand deep in my being, that little voice that says, nah, you don't have to do that right now, that is the voice of resistance. And with resistance, not getting it done. By nature, I'm task-orientated, which is also very Venusian. Remember in the story of Amor and Psyche, Psyche is given 4 tasks in order to gain consciousness. So just the word task, for me, I know that's a call to action. It's, like my task that I gave to myself is cleaning out the center closet and like a decade of papers. So I give myself that task. I devote it to the living of the question. And interesting, I found some fabulous notes that I'm going to share with you of lectures that I gave. One, The Erotic Life of the Foot, and just fabulous, The Crucified Venus. Last Christmas time, I shared the dream and the work of the woman Christ, which actually is, I realize, connected to these mysteries of Pompeii that we are exploring, because the woman Christ is a symbol of the integrated feminine. What does it look like when it's whole? We have all these visions of, there's very few people that we actually meet in living flesh who are really integrated or knowing. And that's part of when women would go to these, in Pompeii, all right, to the Dionysian initiation, the Villa of Mysteries in Pompeii, which I think I've got a Pinterest on what these chambers actually look like. And don't forget, you can download these talks, all of them, and listen whenever you want to on Blog Talk Radio or on my website, LorraineNeithardt.com. or Facebook or Pinterest. I love Pinterest. So we are at the 8th scene in the Mysteries of Pompeii, and where we left off was with that black angel, which was the 7th scene. So that scene bears the feminine features. It's the feminine aspect of Dionysus. And by the way, Dionysus is essentially a double-sexed character. It's both male and female. It's a male god, but raised by women, and so you can go look up the Dionysian mythos. But in this case, these mysteries of Dionysus, originally people thought these mysteries were a bridal chamber, but they're actually not. It's more of a. Well, it's not the bride of death, although I guess you could say that if you really want to scare everybody. It is more for the woman initiate who needs to die to her own way of being, and then be born into the self, with a capital S, the basic feminine self. What does that look like within ourselves? And that's why we're looking at this, because this gives us some hints. Now, sometimes we can fall into this Dionysian initiation in our own Wild West life in America, and by falling in love, or falling into a depression, or falling into illness. It's usually a fall, not an ascent. So everybody wants to ascend, but the action is here on Earth, in the depths of our woundedness and madness and the chaotic beauty of it all. That's where Dionysus lives, not in the world of Apollo and organized thought, which is close to organized crime. We think we've got everything, all our ducks in a row, as they say. We don't know nothing. Just because it sounds logical. There are truths that can be proven and truths that cannot be proven. So this work is about bringing us to knowing, Gnostic, knowing, Sophia. So when these women would, both men and women would be going to these rites, and then at one point in the rite, I think it's about the 4th scene, the man goes off into his chamber, and then the woman descends into other chambers or other scenes. So when the dark angel shows up, at first she's kind of looking droopy and like, what's with the dark angel? What's with the black wings? And the woman is still somewhat probably paralyzed with fear, although she has this kind of frozen expression on her face. But after the encounter with the dark angel, it's very different. So in the underworld, there's an abyss, and it's of a creative power, which was symbolized by the veiled phallus of the 5th scene. And it's transformed itself into the person of the angel and into the divine sympathy of Sophia, whose punishment and reprimand signifies the act of higher love. Now, in this case, Sophia is not the goddess that people usually relate to. In this case, Sophia is the feminine aspect of NAXOS, of knowledge, of knowing. See, in the Gnostic teachings, it is not accepted that the god of this planet is really like the super dude. It doesn't. It's as if it's just a different aspect. But there is an infinity. There is a greater God. There is a purity. It cannot be named. It cannot be imaged. All that stuff. But their belief is well, it's not a belief. They're knowing. They're knowing. There's a difference between belief and knowing. It's kind of like the Matrix. Take the red pill. I mean, you're still part of the chaos, but you don't believe it. So that's the Sophia, the infinite divine feminine. So in this figure, this feminine air, energy, life force, winds, when something blows into our life, or even literally when the air blows past us. Put your prayers on the wind, because these mysteries are Dionysian Mercurius. So this talks about, this scene that we're leaving is about the amazing life of the self-learned wisdom. That's Sophia. So self-learned wisdom, as we were put into, if not through the avenues of destiny, we choose through art, through, in this case, Jungian therapy, through literature, some type of dark sea journey. And if we don't want to go willingly, we're just dropped into it anyway, because the self, with a capital S, wants you to become conscious of its nature. So part of what this last scene and the dark angel is that we begin to realize, on Earth here, that as women, we really do not have access into the masculine principle. We can have a sense. We can stay conscious. But there's nothing more annoying to a man than or actually to anybody, I think, who says, well, I know you better than you know yourself. No, you don't. Actually, no, you don't. We cannot penetrate that mystery unless we do some serious integration. And believe me, you're so busy integrating, you're not making believe you know anybody better. And the same thing, and so often with our own femininity, we don't know we're animus possessed. We got all those opinions. We have it on the highest authority, and we think we got it all locked down, and we understand it. Well, you know what? That's the negative animus. Just opinions. Doesn't know anything from an experience of the divine Sophia, because we wouldn't say the stuff we say. That's how we know. Same with men. Thinking that, oh, well, I know women or what women want, or it's all a big joke. Nobody knows anything. We are all other to one another. And that can become very comfortable because it's kind of like watching a marvelous kaleidoscope or a great mystery movie with the sound down, and you just watch and go like, wow. See, I was fortunate. I was raised with boys. I mean, I was raised with girls, too. I have 7 in the family. I'm the youngest. But the thing about having the boys closest, older but closest, is like you really do start to understand. It's like, wow, man, they are so other. I would have never thought of doing it that way. Nor would have they thought of doing it. So on some level, I intuited boys are other. Marvelously other, enragingly other, but other. So that's what kind of the initiate learns with this dark angel, is that she begins to recognize that her task is not knowing the other externally, but knowing the self. It is the call to individuation. So when she comes out now on the 7th scene, she's kind of like frozen. But then when she comes out on the other side, you see the next picture, the next image, and there's something different. She's more enlivened. There's something going on in her. And that's, of course, what these initiation chambers were about, and what these paintings were about. Is when you can look upon these paintings, you start to get a sense of what was going on in these chambers. And as I said, most of antiquity, since these chambers were discovered, they were under ash from a volcano, and perfectly preserved in Pompeii, Italy. So what we begin to understand in these cults, these Dionysian cults, and also the cult of the Eleusinian, it's hard to say first thing in the morning, is these great mysteries. So the more the woman emancipates herself, and the more the primeval antithesis of the sexes is wiped out through the common increase of consciousness. Now, part of consciousness is that we know that we don't know. And then there's also part that we know, but we don't know what it is that we know. It's feeling. But when we start to get closer to that true stuff, that's the danger. That's when you start hearing the soundtrack to Jaws. Dun, 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 like that. So there's this frightful danger that a woman may lay as the author writes, lay violent hands, not only on the sphere of men, but also directly on the creative spirit. In the experience of the spirit, the woman always stands in the passive role. That doesn't mean we're not doing anything. A passive is very active. We're going to receive. Just the nature of the yin-yang thing, right? She must preserve her maidenly reserve, kind of the not knowing, lest she sound her own feeling and the inflation occurs in herself, and then the whole thing's lost. Go back to Rome and live another year and come back to the initiation next year. So now we're at scene 8, okay? It's connected to the 7th scene where the central symbol of the angel is common to both. In the 8th scene, the gaze of the angel is directed upon the woman's figure. It is against her that the angel kind of raises a whip intended to strike, and that's kind of startling. But in the 8th scene, no longer runs along the short wall of the chamber, but along the outer wall, which has a window in the middle. Now, that's kind of interesting. Everything does mean something. So that's a symbol, that's a hint, that's a, whoa, why did that shift? When you ask yourself the question right before something bursts forth into your life, gee, I wonder what, wow. So it gives a hint that for the initiate, she now knows something. No longer a secret to herself, but in the world. So in the 8th scene, this angel dashes out invisibly, so to speak, from the concealment of the mystery chamber, governed by God himself, into the personal fear. Now the Dionysian pneuma, the air, seizes the initiate, the essence. The initiate is the first figure of the 8th scene, and here again she is represented as kneeling. But how greatly she has changed. Everything stiff, all lifeless, doll likeness has disappeared. Inwardly animated, almost divinely beautiful in her deep despair, she has cast herself down and laid her head with loosened hair in the lap of the priestess who sits behind her, unreservedly surrendering herself to her own knowing. She has been cast out of the innermost sanctuary, and now she's cut off from everything which once was united. After she was torn away from the manifold relatedness of the world, as was shown in the 4th scene, she is suddenly connected. She has this connection. At that point, you're terrified. It's like, what? Why did I do this? She now appears to have lost her relationship to the soul image and thus to spirit. No symbol of the animus is to be seen near her. He is no longer there. But in place of this loss, she has gained something. First, the support of the priestess from the 7th scene, and she has which she heedlessly rejected. And second, her natural humanity. She is completely alive in her moving and hopeless pain. And now she's entirely desperate and thus entirely redeemed. Now the Dionysian Holy Ghost strikes her with its blow. The enthusiastic, puffed-up Seers of the 7th scene has been rejected by the invading Pneuma, but the dark angel looks upon the unhappy woman in her true pain. So to judge by representation, the initiate herself appears not to see the angel. Her eyes no longer too wide open. They are lowered in modesty and fear. But the priestess who sits behind her looks upon the angelic forces. She too is terrified, but she can endure it and calmly perform her office. And that's what people have to understand. When you know something, that doesn't mean that you're not terrified. Of course you're terrified. You're human. But you can contain it. You know it's other. And you certainly are not going to ask why. Because you'll never know why. Which is very, very difficult on the ego. The ego, immediately wants to know why. Why'd that happen? Why'd they die? Why did they die? Because we're born to this life to die. I've always found that a curious question. But of course, it's a way to try to comprehend a mystery. Save yourself the breath. And when we're in the state of mystery, refrain from the why. It doesn't matter. What matters is to recognize you're in the presence of a mystery and get into that groove, and then some serious change begins to happen. And the initiate of the office mysteries, therefore, always goes through the same double process again and again. They know, but they don't know. Or thou art, or thou art not. So it always sounds like, confusing to particularly the Western minds in the 21st century. But we both exist. So this is part. So we're going to continue. I think it's going to take another 2 weeks. Every time I think it's over, it's never over. But that's me. So she's absolutely forced, as we are, because we are initiates in our own chambers, so to speak. She's forced, or we are forced, into the deepest reality, namely into her own femininity. And there's a dangerous animation that we need to understand, because in the feminine, in the entire range, we begin to recognize Sophia, that correct us. And it is like a blow of a whip. It just whacks us into submission, where we begin to listen. Not where we're going to be destroyed. What is going on in my life? So when we begin to ask the question, like I suggested, like ask yourself a question that you can grow into. Not a resolution. That's to indicate you're going to get resolved. No, you're not. And if it is a resolution, it begins with a question. So, beginning the year with a resolution, with the question, what is the task that my soul requires of me to become truly me, not anybody else? If we're still needing to please others, we're doomed. The true self isn't going to show up in that atmosphere. It can't. You can make believe it does, but it can't. Because we need to be able to know that we don't know, and in the not knowing, we become. So, there we have it. I'll put this up on Facebook. Sign up, because the more you sign up, then you'll get notifications. Sign up on Blog Talk Radio, or go to my website and download this, or go to iTunes, Venus Unplugged, and download this. All right, next week. Au revoir.
They're gonna kill the love of my life.
Casey!
If I don't go back to what I was doing.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide, now playing. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. Appropriate for children under 13. Appropriate for children under 13. Appropriate for children under 13.